Hi, class. I hope you're having a good day today. I am here to talk with you about the writer John Cheever and his story from 1954, The 548. So this story is very exciting. And again, I recommend if you don't want me to spoil the plot, that you actually stop this video, read the story, and then you could come back and watch it. Okay, because the plot is very melodramatic. It really keeps you on the edge of your seat as you're reading, because, of course, as we come to see, it's about this spurned secretary who's trying to get revenge on her heartless boss. Okay. And I think the genius of the story, what makes it so remarkable, is the way Cheever presents the characters, right? They have a lot of depth and complexity. Okay, so before I get into the story, I do want to say a little bit about the writer, John Cheever. So let me go ahead and share my screen so I can pull my presentation up. Move me out of the way here. Okay, so there he is. You can see John Cheever, right? He lived for 70 years from 1912 to 1982. He died of lung cancer. And he was a short story writer and also a novelist. He's from the US. He was born in Massachusetts and he died in New York. So he spent most of his life living on the East Coast. And most of his works of literature are also set on the East Coast, most of them actually in New York. You can see, right, I listed all the awards he's won, so many, right? National Book Award twice, Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, National Book Critics Circle Award, and then also the very prestigious National Medal for Literature. So very, very critically acclaimed. Okay, so a little bit about this guy. So he was a high school dropout. When he was only 17 years old, he was actually expelled, right, from his high school for smoking a cigarette, right? How times have changed, right? Um, and he was actually a really gifted writer. So he started writing fiction. He actually had a literary agent and he started to sell his stories in the New Yorker. And he actually in 1942, right, very important, he joined the military, right, during World War II. He was in the Army where he was an infantry gunner. And sadly, most of his infantry company was killed during the D-Day invasion, right, June 6th, 1944, in Normandy, France. Okay, so imagine the impact that that had on him, right? And that's worth noting because as we see as we're reading the story, Blake is a veteran, right? So we kind of have to think about Blake. Does he have PTSD, right? We see a few signs of it. Okay, so back to Carver here. So after the war, right, he was married, right? I should have said that earlier. He married his wife when he was only 28 years old. So he married his wife in 1941, so right before he joined the army. And he remained married to his wife up until his death, right? So over 40 years he was married, and he did have 3 children. Now, okay, so his life sounds pretty good so far. And, you know, to a certain extent, it was very successful man, but he wasn't really very happy. So he struggled with alcoholism, very serious alcoholism, actually. He was, you know, an alcoholic until he went to rehab at the age of 63, right, in 1975. And, you know, we can't speculate why he drank so much, but one thing that a lot of people comment on is the fact that while he was married to his wife, like I said, for over 40 years, he was a closeted bisexual. Okay, so he had extramarital affairs with both men and women, right? And we don't know for sure if his wife, you know, really knew about the extent to these affairs. But we imagine, you know, that that probably had something to do with all the drinking he was doing, because he, you know, there was this very strong desire to keep up appearances, right? Sort of, he was committed to having this quote unquote perfect life, right? Perfect family life with his wife and his children, despite his general feeling of not belonging, right? And having this kind of like secret life with all these extramarital affairs that he was having, right? If you are, any of you are fans of the TV show Seinfeld, right? Believe it or not, there's actually an episode about John Cheever, right? And about this exact topic that I'm discussing right now, right? So in that episode, it's actually called the Cheever Letter, season 4, episode 8. One of the characters, right, finds old letters written by John Cheever in some cabin, right, that they're staying at, and it kind of like discloses the secret, right, of his bisexuality. So kind of interesting little John Cheever tidbit there. Okay, so and I should also actually say, right, we see that in a lot of his stories, right? We see these characters who, seem to have this perfect life, kind of like Blake, this married man, right? From Miss Dent's perspective, Blake's life seems wonderful, right? She really idealizes his life. But we, the reader, know, right? We get some insight. His relationship with his wife is horrible, right? He treats her horribly. He like is, just thinks of her almost with contempt, right? And also his relationship with his son is kind of messed up too. So, that idea of this quote unquote perfect life that you appear to have is actually very different from what's really going on. Okay, on the screen are some of his novels, right? So his 1957 novel, The Wapshot Chronicle, won the National Book Award, right? And you might be wondering, Wapshot, what is that? That's the actual last name of the main character. And he had developed that character again in his 1964 novel, The Wapshot Chronicle. Go forward here. So really, I think what John Cheever is most recognized and famous for are his short stories, right? So the stories of John Cheever won the Pulitzer Prize in 1979, National Book Critics Circle Award, and also the National Book Award. So like, what a great collection of short stories. You might have noticed, right, looking at the syllabus for our class, there's one author who I've assigned 2 short stories, right? And that is John Cheever, right? Just because I love his story so much, I just could not decide between the 2. So I was like, you know what? We're going to read both of them. So I really hope you enjoy them as much as I do. Also, let me add, if any of you watched the TV show Mad Men, right? It was on Netflix, many seasons, great TV show, highly recommended. But the creators of Mad Men, right, said that they were actually inspired by the stories of John Cheever, right? So if you've ever watched the show, it's about these business people, right, that have an advertising agency, and they're drinking highballs and martinis, and like the secretaries, sometimes they have affairs with the secretary. So if you think about the story we just read, you probably can see, right, where the inspiration came from. Another one of John Cheever's stories that I actually use in my American literature class is called The Swimmer. And that was made into a movie, right? Starring Burt Lancaster, who was a very big celebrity at the time, right? 1968. I haven't seen it. I wish I could find it online somewhere. I find the poster in the middle very strange, right? Where it says, when you talk about the swimmer, will you talk about yourself? I'm like, what? Because the story is about this alcoholic man, right? Who loses his family, because of his alcoholism. So I'm kind of like, how does that poster relate? But and then, of course, the story that we're talking about today, right? The 548, right? No big surprise. It was made into films, right? 2 films. It's such a great story. I could just picture it unfolding on the screen, right? So the first film version was in 1968. And then the second one was in 1979. Now, I admit I haven't seen either of them. I wish I could, right? I've just never been able to find them. If any of you can find these movies online, please share them with me. I'd love to see them. Okay, so let me try to be brief here with the story. Okay, so, right, very exciting melodramatic tale about the secretary who's trying to get revenge on her heartless boss. Okay, so our point of view in this story is third person. Okay, we haven't seen that many third person in a while. We've been really talking about a lot of first person narrators. So here we have third person. So third person, what does that mean? Well, the narrator is somebody outside the story, right, telling us what's going on. So referring to all the characters by their name or with the pronoun he or she or they. So now this is what we call third person limited, which means that we do get some insight into one of the characters. right? So again, that limited, we're only limited to knowing a little bit about one of the characters and what they are thinking, right? So some insights. And of course, right, that character in this case is Blake. Okay. So Blake. Right. I feel like this is very like intentional on Cheever's part, right? Because we see Miss Dent only from the outside. But Blake, right, we get some insight, like I said, into his inner life, right? And I feel like that really, helps us understand this character, right? This very complex character, right? And in my opinion, also makes us judge him. Um, so Cheever, right, lets Blake's character reveal itself in specific details, right? So what are some of the details that we can say about Blake's character that reveal, something about him? Well, I think the first one that really jumped out to me was when he hired Miss Blake, right? And then remember Miss Dent, excuse me, not Miss Blake, Miss Dent, right? And then she brought him a rose one day, which is a little strange, right? But, gives him a rose. And what did he do with the rose? Somebody gives you a flower, you might put it in a vase or say thank you or, something. No, not him. He, in front of her, just tosses it in the trash, right? And as if that's not bad enough, he says, I don't like roses. So I get that kind of gives us some insight, right? That he's very rude. He doesn't think about others' feelings, and even the symbol of a rose, right? A red rose, that he's just tossing that in the trash. Who does that, right? Who throws away a flower? That's just, gives us some insight, right? And there's so many, right? I could spend an hour, don't worry, I won't, right? Yeah, I could spend an hour talking about all these details, So another one that really stood out to me was when he fired Miss Dent. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. Forgive me. When he fires Miss Dent, right after they were intimate with each other, right? She invited him over for a drink. He went, they had sex. And then the very next day when she came into work, he had her fired. And he did not even have I guess the courage to do it himself, right? He had a secretary do it. Somebody else did it for him. Okay, so that reveals a lot about this kind of person, right? That he ghosts her after that, right? He has no regard whatsoever for her feelings, for her emotions, and no big surprise, right? Because Cheever actually tells us, right, sure, in that scene where he goes to her apartment, right? He's Cheever writes, most of the many women he had known had been picked for their lack of self-esteem. Okay, so wow, right? This is the kind of man who chooses women who lack self-esteem, right? Who lack self-respect. And so it's easier for him to use them, right? To treat them horribly. Okay, so that gives us a lot of insight. And then, right, since I'm on this page, right, after they have sex, and she's crying, right? Miss Dent is crying in bed. She's weeping. He felt too contented and warm and sleepy to worry much about her tears. He puts on his clothes and just leaves, and then never sees her again. Right? Until she's stalking him, right? But he doesn't intend to ever see her again. So that gives us a lot of insight about this character. And then, right, we learn about his relationship with his wife. So the first instance we actually see, right, because we're reading about it, is that one day when he comes home from work, his wife did not have dinner ready. Right? The moment he walked in, the dinner wasn't ready. And how does he respond? He circles a day on the calendar 2 weeks in advance and says, I'm not going to speak to you for 2 weeks. Right? So talk about emotional abuse. That's just awful. Right? In a way, like I will say, I'd rather have someone slap me than not speak to me for 2 months. Right? Your husband, right? So that, right, gives us a lot of insight. And then his son, right, effectively moved into the neighbor's house, right? What does that suggest? That his son can't stand living at home with his father, right, because of the way he treats the family. Okay. So lots of details that are revealed about Blake's character, right, that help us understand, right, the kind of person he is. Now, we could say the same thing about Miss Dent, right? I love the way Cheever develops her character, right? So I had already mentioned, right? We see that she idealizes Blake's life. You know, he seems to be this happy, right, successful business person. She knows that he's married and she assumes he has a, wonderful relationship with his family, right? And even when she's traveling to Shady Hill where he lives, right? Remember when she first sees it, she's kind of like, God, it's so shabby, right? I didn't picture it to look like this. She really thought it was going to be, this wonderful place. We can say that, she is a very, sort of complicated character in that we do pick up on the sense that there is some kind of, like mental illness. I think it's fair to say going on, right? Because she does seem to believe that she, communicates with God, right? That when she writes the letter to Blake, she addresses it, dear husband, right? And, we're kind of like, they're definitely not married. And that there are a few other little details, right, that suggest that she is deeply disturbed, right? Deeply disturbed. And then, of course, right, she tells Blake that she had been hospitalized for 6 months, right? And she describes like in more detail and when we read that, when she reads the letter, right, that she wrote to Blake, right? And she talks about how when she was hospitalized, that the doctors tried to take away her self-respect, right? And I feel like that's very important to our understanding of the story, right? This idea that her self-respect, right, was again forcibly removed from these doctors in the same way, in a sense, that Blake did to her, right, when he like had sex with her and then just left her, abandoned her, and then ghosted her, right? That damaged her self-respect. Okay. And so why is that so important? Well, then we can say at the end of the story, right, in that kind of climactic moment when she has a gun, right, to Blake's head, basically. And this is after they've gotten off the train. And, this is a very tense moment because as we're reading, we're like, oh my God, is she going to kill him? And maybe part of us is like, kind of hope she does, right? Or maybe not kill him, but at least like shoot the gun and scare him, maybe, um, but she doesn't, right? She doesn't. And she says, right, I want to help you. Okay. And then she says, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. And I shouldn't waste my time or spoil my life like this. Put your face in the dirt. Put your face in the dirt. Do what I say. Put your face in the dirt. Okay. So, she, in saying, I'm better than you, I'm better than you, maybe it's because, right, she's showing some mercy, right, which he kind of did not show her. She is showing a little bit of mercy, and in a sense, right, reclaiming her self-respect, right, because then she goes on to say, right, now I can wash my hands of you, right, because there is some kindness and saneness in me that I can find and use again. Okay. So in a sense, like by showing some compassion towards him, right, by not killing him, just really scaring him, but not killing him, right, she seems to be hoping that that will lead her to sanity. Okay. So this journey for revenge is kind of, in a sense, maybe for her ends in some kind of a redemption, right? Because that maybe she has reclaimed that kindness and that saneness in her, right? So in sharp contrast to his lack of kindness towards her, right? And also very interesting that when Blake left Miss Dent, right, after they had sex, she was weeping, she was crying, and he just left her. And now the tables have turned, right? Because now it is Blake who, with his face in the dirt, he's crying, right? And throughout, and I kind of also sort of laugh as I picture him with his face in the dirt, because throughout the story, he's kind of this prissy guy who's like always fixated on his clothing and other people's clothing and appearances, right? He seems like the kind of person who would not want to have their face in the dirt, right? But yet he's, got his face in the dirt and this moment of terror that he's experiencing, right? No doubt. And, also like if we think about the characters, are they dynamic characters? Do they learn anything throughout the course of this story? Well, I really feel like Miss Dent is a dynamic character, right? Because she, at the end of the story, I feel like exhibits some strength and also some courage, right? Just to follow this man home on the train, to confront him like that with a gun, right? I mean, of course, like it's sick, it's wrong. You should never do something like that, right? I'm not condoning, pointing a gun at someone. Absolutely not. No, right? But yet I feel like that is very different from the way she's described at the beginning of the story, because at the beginning of the story she's very shy, very self-conscious, right? Does not seem like the kind of person that would do something this violent and this bold. Again, I'm saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right, but that, it does show that there's some change in her character, right? And it seems as though by the end, in showing mercy, she feels like, now she can wash her hands of this, right? And that she can move on. Okay, so, we kind of have to wonder, maybe this will help her, we don't really know, but it does say, the story does suggest that she changes. Right now with Blake, it's a little bit more ambiguous because, we don't really know how this experience might affect him, right? Up until the very end, he hasn't changed. He's a very cold, callous, self-centered person who really only thinks about himself, right? But then at the end of the story, when he's got his face in the dirt and he's weeping, right? That same word that Cheever used to describe Miss Dent, right? Weeping. We kind of have to ask ourselves, okay, like why is he crying? Because he doesn't seem like the kind of person who cries easily, right? Why is he crying? What has inspired these tears? Is it his feeling of guilt, right? Realizing that he really hurt this woman. Maybe he feels bad and that's why he's crying. Or, is it kind of also like a self-realization? What a jerk I've been. Maybe like really thinking about that. Or maybe he's just crying out of fear, just the trauma of this experience. Or maybe relief that, she didn't kill him, that she spared him. And like a recognition of his own vulnerability. Right. And again, we know that Blake was a veteran, right? Because when he like first sees that Miss Dent has the gun, it says that he kind of was thinking, remembering seeing dead bodies, right? When he was in the army during the war. Okay. So, all right, lots of things to think about with this story. Maybe we can kind of wrap it up here. I should say I can wrap it up here by, just saying like what is the theme? What is the main idea that John Cheever is trying to convey, right? Well, I feel like it does highlight the gender power imbalances that we sometimes see, especially when we're looking at literature from the 1950s, right? This male superiority that we see in Blake, right? And then, Miss Dent's character, I feel like this issue of self-respect, right? That we see this person who again is mentally imbalanced, right? Uh, that she's trying to claim her self-respect, right? That the doctors tried to take, that Blake damaged, and just kind of asking ourselves, does she successfully reclaim that, right? She says, I'm better than you, so is that, I feel like that gives us a lot of insight into her. And then even just you could say the theme of revenge, right? Why do people seek revenge? How do people get revenge? And is this a revenge tale? If so, does Miss Dent get revenge? Okay. I guess that's all I want to say about the story. I hope that you enjoy reading it. and I really look forward to reading your comments on the discussion board. Okay, that's it for today. Have a great rest of your day.